welcome or welcome back to my channel. To kick off this month's reading, I will be reading a book that I plan to scratch off of my 100 Epic Reads of a Lifetime poster, which is likely a video that you will see coming out this month. And the book that I've chosen for that this month is 1984 by George Orwell. And besides that, I think the only book that I have concrete on my TBR is Mona Awad's Bunny, because I couldn't not read this in April during Easter. So that's it for now. I will hopefully update you soon on my minimal thoughts about 1984 as well as me starting another book. And I don't know what to get for an audiobook this month, so stay tuned. Hey there. Just a quick update to say that along with reading 1984 by George Orwell, I am going to start Blood and Chocolate by Annette Klause. It's an old YA werewolf book that I've been wanting to read for a few years now, so I'm very excited to start it. So I read Blood and Chocolate in one day. I've been wanting to read it since 2017, so as soon as I got my hands on it, I just gobbled it all up. Thankfully, it is only 260-something pages, so I was able to get through it very, very quickly. For those of you who don't know, Blood and Chocolate by Annette Klause is a late 90s, I'll correct myself, YA werewolf book about a main character named Vivian, who is struggling both with the experiences of having a human boyfriend for the first time and making human friends, as well as struggling with the complicated dynamics of her pack. I've been wanting to read it for a while because not only is it a standalone werewolf book, which are really rare, but it has a female protagonist and a female werewolf, which is something that I really like in my werewolf books. I ultimately gave the book 3 stars because the dynamics between the teenagers and the way that they speak was really realistic, even for the time period. There wasn't anything too embarrassing going on, as well as they had proper scenes where they were hanging out and being friends and doing normal teenager things. And I feel like that's really lacking in a lot of YA books. Of course, a lot of them are very high fantasy, so you can't really have mundane scenes, but I do like the mundane scenes of Vivian just going to have a sleepover with her friends, hanging out with her boyfriend, meeting his parents, etc. And the world building of the werewolves was pretty standard, but I felt that it was very effective for what it was. However, the book ultimately failed because it has a lot of very, very questionable content, and at times it is very, very insensitive. Vivian experiences brutal internalized misogyny and slut-shaming, especially to her own mother, and she compares other human females and female werewolves to be very horny, to be very bitchy, and to just be ultimately very rude to her. She's one of those protagonists that thinks, oh, everybody hates me just because I'm so hot, which I think is pretty gross. And unfortunately, this werewolf book sticks very much to a very animalistic, very aggressive, and very patriarchal werewolf universe, which is something I absolutely hate. They try to make it a bit more feminist by having female characters fight for in the big alpha fight during the climax, but that ultimately just becomes all of the females fighting and all of the males fighting separately. They also refer to every female werewolf with the term bitch. Not derogatory, just the way that they're referred to. And I hate that. No one refers to female dogs like that anymore unless you're disgusting. I did enjoy how this YA book didn't really shy away from the more violent aspects of being a werewolf, that being changing and the fights that they had, but there was some questionable content that I personally do not agree with. One of them was there were multiple examples of underaged and huge age gap power dynamic relationships between both older women and younger men and older men and younger women. The main character at the end ends up with a man who is, I believe, 24 or even older, and she's still in high school. So that's very disgusting, especially since she has been slut-shaming her mother, who is obviously a mother of a teenager age, and she is dating a 24-year-old. While that is also very questionable and has a lot of discussion underneath it, it is a little bit better than a teenage girl dating an adult man, but I do understand how both are wrong. And the book frames it as, okay, the main character does mock her mom a lot, but it is still framed as acceptable within the werewolf community, and I think that is very, very disgusting. And a lot of the male werewolves in Vivian's age group also tend to sexually harass her, demean her, and she is almost assaulted at one point, as well as the main character who she ends up with in the end was courting her, that being following her, pressuring her, and forcing her into awkward situations for the entirety of the book. I really liked the human boyfriend character Aiden. I thought his arc was very interesting, and his reactions to everything were very realistic. It is a shame what happens to him in the end, but I suppose that is just the way it goes, to show that humans and werewolves can't really ever mix properly. But piling on that topic, the author makes it explicitly clear that werewolves and humans should stick to their own kind in a way that is almost the implications of segregation. I understand they are fantasy characters and not real, but that's the message that is really brought across in this book and made me really, really uncomfortable. So yeah, while I enjoyed this book for what it was, I can step outside of all the disgusting, horrible aspects of it while I'm reading, but I don't know if I would recommend this for a modern audience with modern sensibilities. Obviously, toxic, power imbalanced age gap relationships are not fun to read about, nor is internalized misogyny. So I enjoyed the book for what it was, but I will not purchase it. I read it as an ebook anyway. So that's it for now. I'm still reading 1984, and it's very boring. It's very much a high school book. I would have been able to write a really good essay on this book. So that's it for now. Hey, how's it going? I cut my hair. I thought I would give an update on what I'm reading. So I'm currently halfway through Bunny by Mona Awad, and it is very crazy. I'm really enjoying it. I typically don't like books that has such a weird, off-putting writing style. Like, it's very slang heavy. It's very quirky prose, and it's not very traditional. But I am really enjoying it. I do enjoy the unique style of the book and the very effed up events that are happening. I don't know what's gonna happen next. It's really cool and interesting, and it's one of the weirdest books I've ever read, but I'm greatly enjoying it because it's not losing itself in its own, like, pretentiousness. It very much just is what it is, and it's a short book, so I am finding myself really, really enjoying it. I am also listening to the audiobook of Something in the Blood by David J. Skal. It is an attempt at a biography about Bram Stoker, despite the fact that Bram didn't really leave much biographical information behind aside from just boring stuff. So it is really interesting seeing how the author is trying to grasp moments of Bram Stoker's life based on the little that we have of him. He's focusing a lot on Oscar Wilde, which is very interesting, but I picked up the title for Bram Stoker, not necessarily for Oscar Wilde, but it is interesting. And it is also, I believe, the first published work that has the full letter that Bram Stoker wrote to Walt Whitman that he never sent. And it was very lovely to hear. It was really, really a cute letter. The author is going a bit Freudian, though, with Bram Stoker's childhood. He's trying to imply that his perception of sexuality and gender is all screwed up because he was dressed in female clothing as a child, which was a normal thing to do, especially since Bram Stoker never left really the house until he was 7. He was ill. I don't understand why it's such a heavy-handed argument that is very Freudian, it's very outdated, and I hate it. But aside from that, it is alright. It is a pretty long audiobook, but I'm getting through it pretty quickly. So that's it for now. I am going to try this month to read The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. Last month it just didn't work out. So let's see if I actually get to that this month. So that's it for now. It has been gloomy the past couple of days, so I haven't really filmed anything. I just wanted to check in to say that I have finished Bunny by Mona Awad, and I gave it 5 stars. It is one of the weirdest books I've ever read, but I enjoyed it a lot. I really appreciated that it was such a short book, but was able to keep me engaged the entire time. I don't know if I would recommend it for everybody, but I really, really enjoyed it. It was very weird, very quirky language, and it was very cool. And I was compelled the whole time. And I thought it was really funny. Even though there were darker themes in it, such as animal death, they were kind of described more like a fairy tale than like an actual gruesome act. But once again, you should check out possible content warnings if you don't feel comfortable reading stuff like that. But ultimately, I want to read it again and I want to recommend it to others. So I really, really enjoyed it. It might be one of my favorite books of the year. And secondly, I am once again tackling this. I've had a lot of trouble with this book in the past, and I actually DNF'd it last year in June, but now I am trying to combat that as both a buddy read and by trying to write more things down. I had to write down all the characters' names and how they're connected just to keep everything straight in my head, and so far I am doing better upon second read. I am like 77 pages into it, but it's 500 pages, so I should really get into it. So that's my update. Hey, so it has been more than a few days. My partner came to visit for their birthday, so I had a few days with them. But in the meantime, I managed to finish a lot of books. I finished Something in the Blood by David J. Skal, and I think I gave it 3 stars. I enjoyed listening to it because I liked learning about the Victorian era that Bram wrote in and grew up in and lived in, but it was too focused on things that were way outside of his life, such as Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde got like an entire chapter on his death, and Bram Stoker and his wife both got about 3 sentences each. So it was just a bit of a mixed up book. It didn't really have too much of a focus, and the intense Freudian psychoanalysis of his sexuality was a bit too put upon. I don't mind a casual analysis of his sexuality because it was so fluid, but to put it strictly into Freudian means is very outdated and very icky. I then finally finished The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, and I only gave that 2 stars. It is considered a sensationalist novel, I might be saying that wrong, which is just a novel that reflects the anxieties of the Victorian era and identity at the time, because Britain was going through a huge upheaval of identity and new like paperwork for your person, and people were getting scared about their identity being stolen. So The Woman in White was considered one of the great novels in this very niche and specific genre in England in the 1860s and 70s, and that in itself is pretty cool. It's also the precursor for basically the found footage film, how Dracula is sort of the found footage book, which can also be considered epistolary, but it's the idea that it's multiple people's points of views and like media that they've made put into one novel, and The Woman in White was that. Problem was, it was not compelling. It was not a compelling mystery. I figured everything out because in the Victorian novel, your appearance is your morality. So if you're described as beautiful and innocent, you're beautiful and innocent. And if you're described as fat, ugly, an old man, you're a bastard, right? So I figured out the villains immediately, and I figured out the identity switch immediately. I can't even show you the copy of the novel. I already donated it to one of my neighborhood's front yard mini library boxes. You know what those are. And I picked up this book instead. So I'll be reading this soon. I did find out, though, that this author's name is a pseudonym and it's actually a man. So I'm not looking forward to that. And the book that I am currently reading now is Daughters of Shadow and Blood 2, Elena. That is the second book in that vampire series that I had read last year about the three brides of Dracula. So I'm finally starting the second book, and it is just the same as the first book in terms of its beginning. So hopefully we get to learn more about the second bride of Dracula's life. She seems to be a peasant girl this time. So excited to see what else happens in the book. That's my update for now. Wrap up time, wrap up time, wrap up time, woo! Once again, I had another average reading month, even though I read books that I really enjoyed. So technically, the first book that I read this month was Blood and Chocolate by Annette Klause, which I ended up giving 3 stars to. While it was a pretty good YA standalone werewolf book, it had too many problems, both of its time and of just misogyny and underage relationships, that I just could not fully commit to it, and they kind of made the ultimate whole of the book very weak. I then read 1984 by George Orwell for my 100 Epic Reads of a Lifetime poster, and I only gave that one 3 stars as well. It was very boring. I wasn't engaged in it. Sure, it was a compelling idea, but I don't know. I then read Bunny by Mona Awad, which I gave 4.5 stars. This is a good book. Read it if you can. I then listened to the audiobook of, let me read the title, Something in the Blood, The Untold Story of Bram Stoker, the man who wrote Dracula, by David J. Skal, which I only gave 3 stars again. It was pretty interesting for the descriptions of the time period and what impacted Bram Stoker, both his job, his family, and his friendships. But there wasn't really enough on him, and I understand that is the problem. But if you get out a book about Bram Stoker, you might not want to hear that much about Oscar Wilde, but I then read The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins and gave it 2 stars because it was not that compelling of a mystery. I could predict everything, and it was just very boring. And finally, I closed the month reading Daughters of Shadow and Blood 2 by J. Matthew Saunders, which I gave 3 stars. I didn't like it as much as the first book because it didn't really focus enough on the second bride, which was Elena. She was a peasant in Romania, I believe. I could be wrong. But it didn't have enough of her in it. Meanwhile, in the first book, we got quite a mystery with Yasmina, and it was a compelling story that sort of added to the arc of the entire story from everyone's perspective. And this one, Elena does not add anything. Plus, I think there are too many character perspectives, too many secret organizations trying to get Dracula's medallion, and just too much complicated stuff that I couldn't really follow. So I do hope that the third book is better. So that's it. That was my month of April. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will be making more in the future. So please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.